Kendra, betrayed by her husband who divorced her via text and emptied their joint account, embarks on a journey of self-discovery and revenge, ultimately exposing his criminal ties and reclaiming her independence and strength. Have you ever been in a situation like Kendra's, where her husband suddenly turned cold and distant after deciding to divorce her and empty their joint account? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comment below, and click on the subscribe button for more stories. Kendra Caldwell had always believed in the stability of her life. At 34, she was a marketing executive who worked hard to provide for her small family. She prided herself on her ability to juggle work, her marriage to Ryan, and their plans for the future. But on an ordinary Tuesday morning, everything unraveled. It happened during her coffee break. Kendra's phone buzzed with a message from Ryan. Smiling, she expected it to be his usual midday check-in. But as she opened the message, her world came crashing down. Kendra, I think it's best we part ways. I've filed for divorce. Please don't contact me. Also, I've taken the funds from our joint account. Good luck. The words blurred on the screen as Kendra read them over and over again, each word slicing through her heart like shards of glass. Her hands trembled, nearly dropping the phone, as her mind raced to make sense of what she'd just read. This had to be a mistake. Ryan couldn't do this. Panicked, she checked their joint account. The balance stared back at her, $0. Every penny of their savings, money she'd worked tirelessly to build, was gone. Her chest tightened as memories flooded her mind. Ryan's charming smile when they opened the account together, his promises of building a future as a team. Had it all been a lie? Colleagues passing by noticed her pale face and frozen stare. You okay, Sam? One asked, but she could barely manage a nod. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. Dialing Ryan's number, her heart pounded with each ring. Straight to voicemail. She tried again, and again. The same robotic voice greeted her, offering no comfort, no explanations. Desperation turned to anger as she clenched her phone. This wasn't just a breakup, this was betrayal. Kendra wasn't the kind of woman to sit idly by while someone stole her life from under her. Ryan thought he could walk away with everything, leaving her broken and powerless. He was wrong. With a deep breath, she closed her phone and steeled herself. Kendra didn't know exactly what she'd do next, but one thing was certain. Ryan had no idea what she was capable of. Kendra spent the rest of the day in a haze, her mind replaying the text message like a broken record. By the time she got home, her apartment felt colder, emptier, as if Ryan had taken more than just their savings. She dropped her bag by the door and scanned the room for any sign of his presence. The jacket he always left on the chair was gone. His running shoes were missing from the entryway. Even his favorite mug, the one she used to tease him about, had vanished. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. He had planned this. She sank into the couch, exhaustion setting in. A bottle of wine sat on the coffee table, half full, untouched since their last night together. It felt like a cruel joke now, a reminder of the life she thought they shared. Kendra's mind raced as she tried to piece together the cracks she'd ignored, the signs she hadn't seen. Ryan had always been charming, almost too charming. They'd met at a networking event 5 years ago, where he'd swept her off her feet with his quick wit and magnetic smile. He was a real estate agent with big dreams, someone who could make anyone feel like they were the center of his universe. For a while, she'd believed she was. But as she replayed their time together, she saw the red flags she had missed. The late nights at work that turned into excuses. The vague answers when she asked about his deals. The trips he took alone, claiming they were for business. She'd brushed it all off, trusting him because that's what a good wife was supposed to do. And then there were the fights. Not explosive, but subtle. Ryan had a way of making her feel like she was always overreacting. When she questioned why he wanted sole access to their finances for efficiency, he made her feel paranoid. When she asked why he seemed distant, he'd flash that same disarming smile and call her crazy for worrying so much. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. He hadn't just stolen their money. He'd been chipping away at her confidence for years. Kendra wiped a tear from her cheek, anger replacing her sadness. She grabbed her laptop and opened the folder labeled Finances. Meticulously, she began combing through their records, searching for anything suspicious. If Ryan thought she was going to fade into the background, he didn't know her at all. Her phone buzzed again, and she flinched. For a fleeting moment, she hoped it was Ryan, apologizing, explaining everything. But it was only a message from her best friend, Lisa. Dinner this weekend? Haven't seen you in ages. Kendra stared at the screen. Should she tell Lisa what was happening? No, not yet. She wasn't ready to be the subject of pity or gossip. For now, she needed to stay focused. With determination burning in her chest, Kendra shut the laptop and stood. Her illusions of a perfect marriage were shattered, but she wasn't. Ryan may have blindsided her, but she wasn't going to let him win. Whatever secrets he was hiding, she would find them, and she would make sure he regretted every single lie. The next morning, Kendra woke up with a heavy sense of determination. The raw pain from Ryan's betrayal hadn't faded, but it had transformed into something sharper, resolve. She wasn't just going to sit around and wallow in her heartbreak. If Ryan wanted to destroy her life, he'd have to work a lot harder than this. Her first step was to assess the damage. Sitting at the kitchen table with a strong cup of coffee, she reopened her laptop and logged into every account she could think of. Savings? Gone. Retirement fund? Empty. Credit cards? Thankfully, they were in her name alone, but she noticed a recent attempt to access her account. Her heart sank as the realization hit her. Ryan had tried to max out her credit too, but he didn't have the right credentials. She leaned back in her chair, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "You really thought of everything, didn't you, Ryan?" she muttered to the empty room. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Startled, Kendra hesitated for a moment before getting up. She wasn't expecting anyone. Peering through the peephole, she relaxed when she saw Lisa's familiar face. Lisa barged in as soon as the door opened, her expression a mix of concern and urgency. "Sam, you look terrible. What's going on? You didn't answer my texts last night." Kendra hesitated. She hadn't planned to involve anyone yet, but the look on Lisa's face told her there was no escaping this conversation. She motioned for Lisa to sit down and then, in a rush of words, poured out everything. The text, the emptied account, the years of manipulation she now realized she'd endured. Lisa's jaw dropped. "He divorced you by text? And stole all your money? Sam, that's not just cruel, it's illegal." "Is it?" Kendra asked bitterly. "Because right now, it feels like he's getting away with everything." "Not for long," Lisa said firmly. "First of all, you need a lawyer. A good one. And second, you need to report this to the bank. If he drained your joint account, there has to be a trail." Kendra nodded, feeling a flicker of hope for the first time. Lisa was right. There had to be a way to fight back. They spent the next few hours making calls. Kendra's bank confirmed that Ryan had indeed transferred the money to a separate account, one that wasn't joint. She felt a surge of anger as she imagined him calmly plotting his escape, but the bank representative assured her they'd flagged the transaction for investigation. Next, Lisa helped her search for a lawyer. By midday, Kendra had scheduled an appointment with a divorce attorney, known for being ruthless with cases like hers. When the calls were done, Kendra leaned back in her chair, exhausted but strangely lighter. "Thank you, Lisa. I don't know what I'd do without you." Lisa smiled and squeezed her hand. "You're stronger than you think, Sam. Ryan doesn't know what he's just unleashed." As Lisa left, Kendra felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in days: control. Ryan might have blindsided her, but she was starting to take back the reins. That night, as she lay in bed, Kendra scrolled through her phone, looking at old photos of her and Ryan. In every picture, he looked so genuine, so loving. But now, all she could see was the lie beneath the surface. She deleted the photos one by one. Tomorrow, she decided, would be the start of a new chapter. Ryan may have knocked her down, but Kendra Caldwell wasn't staying down. Not for long. Kendra sat in the sleek office of her newly hired attorney, Sandra Nolan, the next morning. The walls were lined with shelves of legal books, and the faint hum of conversation from the reception area buzzed in the background. Rebecca, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with an air of authority, leaned forward from behind her desk. "Let me get this straight," Sandra said, flipping through the notes she'd taken during their initial consultation. "Your husband filed for divorce without warning, cleared out your joint account, and sent you a text message to notify you? And you have no idea where he is now?" Kendra nodded, her hands clenched in her lap. "That's exactly it. I've called him dozens of times, but he's not answering. He's just vanished." Rebecca's lips tightened. "Well, he's made one major mistake. He underestimated how much trouble he's just walked into. What he's done with the bank account is legally questionable at best. And if he's been hiding assets, we'll uncover them." For the first time in days, Kendra felt like she wasn't fighting this battle alone. Rebecca's confidence was infectious, and Kendra found herself sitting up straighter in her chair. "What do I need to do?" Kendra asked, her voice steadier than it had been since this ordeal began. Sandra handed her a checklist. First, I need you to provide me with any financial documents you can find, bank statements, tax returns, property records, anything that might give us a clue about his assets or financial activity. Second, start documenting everything you remember, conversations, transactions, behaviors. Anything that fell off in the months leading up to this. Even the smallest detail could be important. Kendra nodded, tucking the checklist into her bag. I'll get started right away. As she left the office, Kendra's phone buzzed. It was Lisa. How did it go with the lawyer? Lisa asked. She's amazing, Kendra said, her voice lighter. She's confident we can track him down and get to the bottom of this. Good, Lisa said, because I've been doing some digging of my own. What do you mean? Kendra asked, stopping in her tracks. Lisa hesitated for a moment before continuing. I reached out to a friend of mine, Javier. He's a private investigator. I told him a little about your situation, and he's willing to help. He said he can start looking into Ryan's whereabouts and any suspicious activity. Kendra was stunned. Lisa, I don't even know what to say. You didn't have to do that. Of course I did, Lisa replied. You're my best friend. And besides, we both know Ryan's up to something shady. If anyone can dig up the truth, it's Javier. Later that evening, Kendra met Javier at a small coffee shop. He was a wiry man in his late 30s with a keen gaze that made her feel both exposed and reassured at the same time. He listened intently as Kendra recounted everything, jotting down notes in a small leather notebook. From what you've told me, this guy's been planning his escape for a while, Javier said. But no one vanishes without leaving a trail. I'll start with his financial records and see where that takes me. If he's hiding money, or himself, I'll find it. Kendra left the meeting feeling a new sense of hope. Between Rebecca's legal expertise and Javier's investigative skills, she finally felt like she was gaining ground. That night, she sat at her desk, sorting through old bank statements and receipts. As she flipped through the papers, something caught her eye, a large transfer from their joint account to a name she didn't recognize. The date was only a few weeks before Ryan had left. She stared at the name, her mind racing. Who was this person? And what was Ryan doing sending them money? Kendra took a photo of the statement and sent it to Javier with a simple message. Found this. Could be something. Minutes later, her phone buzzed. Javier's reply was short but promising. It's definitely something. I'll look into it. Kendra closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair. Ryan had gone to great lengths to betray her, but now she had allies, and she wasn't going down without a fight. The next few days passed in a blur of activity, filled with phone calls, meetings, and the constant buzzing of her phone with updates from Javier. Kendra found herself working harder than ever before, determined to uncover every hidden detail of her husband's betrayal. But with each piece of information Javier uncovered, the weight of her realization grew heavier. It had only been a few days since Kendra had sent him the photo of the mysterious transfer, and already, Javier had uncovered something significant. The name from the transfer was linked to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, one Ryan had opened under an alias. The account had been active for nearly 2 years, steadily accumulating funds that Kendra had never known about. As she sat in her living room, reviewing the evidence with Javier over a video call, the gravity of the situation settled over her. Ryan's been hiding money all this time, she muttered, rubbing her eyes. Why would he keep an account like this from me? Javier leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. You're not the only one he's been hiding things from. According to the records, there have been multiple transactions over the years, including wire transfers to various shell companies. This isn't just about a simple betrayal. Your husband has been laundering money. Kendra felt her stomach churn. She had always trusted Ryan, believed that his charm and success were the result of hard work. But now, it seemed like everything she'd known about him had been a carefully crafted illusion. She had married a man who wasn't just dishonest. He was involved in something much bigger than she had ever imagined. What do I do now? She asked, her voice quiet but resolute. First, Javier said, we need to secure the evidence. I'll work on tracing the flow of the money to see who else might be involved. In the meantime, you need to be careful. If Ryan is involved in anything illegal, he might try to cover his tracks. Kendra nodded, feeling both empowered and terrified. She hadn't anticipated this, hadn't expected to uncover something so sinister beneath the surface of her marriage. But now, she was in too deep to back out. The following days brought even more shocking discoveries. As Javier dug deeper, he uncovered a network of shell companies and hidden properties linked to Ryan's offshore account. But it wasn't just financial secrets that Kendra uncovered. Through her own digging, she discovered another unsettling truth. Ryan had been having an affair. She found the evidence in a private email account she'd never known existed. In it were messages between Ryan and a woman named Charlotte, someone Kendra had never heard of. The messages were intimate, filled with declarations of love and promises of a future together. Kendra felt sick. All the years of trusting Ryan, believing in their love, had been shattered by this betrayal. She stared at the screen, her mind struggling to comprehend the extent of the lies. Ryan had not only taken her money and filed for divorce, but he had also been living a double life. In a moment of fury, Kendra slammed the laptop shut. She couldn't keep reading. The man she had once adored, the man who had promised to build a future with her, had become a stranger. But as the rage subsided, a new feeling took its place: clarity. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about taking back her life, about making sure Ryan couldn't get away with everything he'd done. She picked up her phone and called Rebecca. "I'm ready," Kendra said, her voice steady. "Let's take this to court." Rebecca's voice was filled with approval. "Good. We've got the evidence we need. Let's make sure Ryan knows that his game is over." Kendra hung up, her pulse quickening. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain. Ryan had no idea what he was about to face. The next few days were a whirlwind of strategy and preparation. Kendra spent countless hours with Rebecca, reviewing every shred of evidence they had collected so far. The affair, the offshore accounts, the shell companies, every betrayal, every lie had been carefully cataloged, and now it was time to turn it into something she could use. Sandra had already begun drafting a formal legal complaint, but Kendra knew that merely presenting the evidence wasn't going to be enough. She needed more. She needed to make Ryan feel the weight of his actions, to show him that his carefully constructed web of lies had begun to unravel. Kendra's phone buzzed. It was a message from Javier. "I found something interesting. Ryan's offshore account recently received a large deposit from a company called Greystone Ventures. I'll dig deeper, but this could be the key we need to tie everything together." Kendra read the message twice, her heart racing. Greystone Ventures. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't place it. She needed answers, and fast. "Javier, I need everything you can find on Greystone Ventures," she typed back. Anything that could tie it to Ryan. The sense of urgency drove her forward. She couldn't afford to waste time. Her next step was to dig deeper into the financial side of things. She called her bank once again, asking for a detailed history of the joint account, and specifically any transactions made in the last 6 months. As she sifted through the documents, she came across another troubling discovery. In the weeks leading up to Ryan's sudden disappearance, there had been a series of transfers made to an unknown recipient, someone who had no connection to their shared financial history. The amounts were large, even by their standards. It was clear now that Ryan had been preparing for this moment for some time. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. Kendra opened it to find Lisa standing there, holding a coffee in one hand and a stack of papers in the other. "You're working yourself to the bone," Lisa said, setting the coffee down on the kitchen counter. "I brought you some backup." Kendra frowned as she glanced at the papers. "What's this?" Lisa grinned. "I've been doing some more digging. I didn't want to bug you while you were meeting with Rebecca, but I thought you'd want to see this." She handed over the papers. "It's a list of Greystone Ventures board members. And guess who's on the list?" Kendra's eyes widened as she skimmed the names. "Ryan," she said softly, her voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and rage. How is this possible?" Lisa shrugged. "It looks like Ryan's been involved in this company for a while. I've also found some connections between Greystone and a few of the shell companies you've been tracking. Seems like Ryan's been laundering money through them. This might explain why he's been so careful with the money." Kendra's pulse quickened. If she could prove that Ryan had been using Greystone Ventures as a front for his financial dealings, she could completely dismantle his defense in court. This was the break she needed. "I'll make sure Sandra gets these documents," Kendra said, a sense of determination settling over her. "We need to move fast." That evening, as she prepared for the next phase of their strategy, Kendra received another message from Javier. "Greystone Ventures is a front for a larger network of companies. There are offshore holdings, anonymous investments, and several shell companies involved. Ryan isn't just laundering money, he's in deep with some dangerous people." Kendra's blood ran cold. Dangerous people? She hadn't considered the possibility that Ryan might be involved in something more than just financial schemes. But if he was mixed up with people who weren't afraid to play dirty, this was no longer just a divorce case. It was a fight for her future. But instead of fear, Kendra felt a surge of clarity. If Ryan thought he could hide behind his lies and his money, he was wrong. She was done being the victim. The next morning, Kendra met with Rebecca, Lisa, and Javier at the law office. They laid out their strategy. They would present the evidence of Ryan's offshore accounts, the shell companies, the affair, and now the involvement with Greystone Ventures. Sandra nodded, her eyes gleaming with approval. We've got everything we need to bury him. He won't see this coming. Kendra took a deep breath. This is it. No more holding back. I'm taking back control. The war had officially begun, and this time, Kendra wasn't fighting to survive. She was fighting to win. Kendra sat in Rebecca's office, the weight of the moment pressing on her chest. Across from her, Sandra meticulously arranged the files, each one containing evidence of Ryan's betrayals. The affair, the offshore accounts, the secret company. Everything was neatly laid out, ready to be presented in court. But it wasn't just the legal fight that was consuming her. It was the emotional toll. How could Ryan have done this? How could the man she had loved, the man she had built a life with, have hidden so many dark secrets? The questions plagued her, but there was no time for answers. The battle had already begun. Sandra cleared her throat, drawing Kendra back to the present. We've reviewed everything. We're ready to file for an injunction to freeze the assets. As soon as we do, Ryan won't be able to access any of his accounts, and the court will have no choice but to take our evidence seriously. Kendra nodded, her fingers twitching nervously. And the affair? What's the plan with that? Rebecca's lips tightened. We're going to use it as leverage. He won't be able to deny the emotional toll this has taken on you. It's not just about money, it's about his betrayal, and the court needs to see that. We'll ask for full custody of the house, assets, and a hefty settlement. Kendra swallowed hard. I'm not doing this for money. I need him to pay for what he did to me. Sandra leaned forward, her voice softer now. And he will. We're not just taking him to court for the financial damage. We're taking him for the emotional damage, too. He destroyed your life, Kendra. It's time for him to answer for that. Kendra felt a surge of emotion rise within her, but she pushed it down. This wasn't about emotions anymore. It was about survival. And she was ready to fight, ready to strike back. That afternoon, Kendra received a call from Javier. He had some new information. I've been digging deeper into Greystone Ventures, he said, his voice filled with urgency. I found something big. Ryan's involvement goes further than I thought. He's been laundering money through several different international accounts, and I've traced a large deposit to an account linked to someone named Marcus Holloway. Ever heard of him? Kendra's heart skipped a beat. Marcus Holloway. The name was unfamiliar, but she could feel the pieces of this puzzle falling into place. She didn't know who Marcus was, but it was clear he was part of Ryan's network, part of the dangerous world she was now tangled in. I don't know him, Kendra replied, trying to steady her voice. But if he's connected to Ryan, then we need to figure out who he is and what he's doing. Javier's voice grew more serious. I'm on it. I'll find out everything I can. But this is getting risky, Sam. Ryan's not just some businessman anymore. He's involved in something big, something dangerous. Kendra's stomach churned. She had already known this deep down. Ryan's financial web wasn't just a collection of poor decisions. It was a criminal network, and she had unknowingly married into it. But now, as the threat grew larger, she couldn't back down. There was no turning back. The next morning, Sandra filed the injunction, and Kendra's pulse raced as she waited for the confirmation. It felt like the calm before a storm, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. But that evening, just as she was about to relax, her phone rang. It was an unknown number, but Kendra's instincts told her it was important. She picked up the phone, her voice cautious. Kendra, it's Ryan. Her heart dropped. His voice was cold, detached. We need to talk. Kendra felt her throat tighten. Talk? After everything you've done. I didn't want it to come to this, Ryan said, his tone smooth, almost rehearsed. But you've left me no choice. Kendra's blood ran cold. What do you mean? I'm willing to settle, Sam, Ryan said, the words dripping with insincerity. I'll give you what you want. But you need to drop the case. This could get ugly, and you don't want to go down that road. Kendra's mind raced. This was the first time he'd reached out since he disappeared. The man who had destroyed her life, who had taken everything, was now trying to control the narrative. He was trying to intimidate her into backing down. No, she said firmly, her voice steady. I'm not backing down. You can't intimidate me anymore. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and then Ryan's voice broke through, colder now. "You've made a big mistake, Sam. I hope you're ready for what's coming." The call ended abruptly, leaving Kendra staring at her phone in disbelief. Her hands trembled, but she refused to let the fear creep in. She had already made her decision. The battle lines had been drawn. Ryan had just fired the first shot, but Kendra wasn't about to retreat. As she sat in the quiet of her apartment, her phone buzzing with updates from her lawyer and Javier, Kendra realized something important. Ryan may have thought he could control her with fear, but he had underestimated her resolve. This was only the beginning, and she was ready for whatever came next. The days after Ryan's call were filled with a tense stillness, like the calm before a storm. Kendra couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to break wide open, but she wasn't sure what or when. She had expected Ryan to try to reach out, maybe offer some token settlement or attempt to manipulate her into backing down. But the anger and coldness in his voice had unsettled her. It was clear he wasn't going to make this easy. In the meantime, Rebecca's team had begun preparing their case in full force. The injunction was filed, and the court had agreed to freeze Ryan's assets while they investigated the financial fraud. But Kendra knew this wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about sending a message, not only to Ryan, but to anyone who thought they could take her for granted. Kendra spent her days poring over documents, meeting with Rebecca, and speaking with Javier. Each piece of evidence they uncovered about Ryan's shady dealings seemed to tighten the noose around his neck. But just as Kendra thought they were gaining ground, something unexpected happened. It was late one afternoon when Kendra received a call from Javier. "I've got bad news," he said, his voice strained. "Marcus Holloway, he's got ties to some very powerful people. I've been digging into his background, and I'm starting to connect the dots. Ryan isn't just laundering money for himself. Holloway's been involved in international arms dealing and other illicit operations. We're talking organized crime." Kendra's heart dropped. She had known this wasn't just about dirty money, but hearing it laid out so plainly made everything more real, more dangerous. She felt a wave of nausea hit her. The life she thought she was living, the one she had worked so hard to build with Ryan, had been nothing more than a facade, hiding the truth from her. "How bad is this?" Kendra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Bad. Really bad," Javier replied. "I've got a few more contacts looking into Holloway's operations, but I think it's time you consider the possibility that Ryan might not just be hiding from the law. He might be in hiding from dangerous people." Kendra sat down, her mind racing. The stakes had just escalated. She had gone from simply wanting to expose Ryan's betrayal to realizing that his entire world, her world, had been built on lies and crime. "I need to talk to Rebecca," Kendra said, trying to steady her breath. This just got much more complicated. The next morning, Sandra arrived at Kendra's apartment with a somber expression. She had obviously heard about the new developments, and Kendra could see the worry in her eyes. "We need to talk about our next steps," Sandra said as she sat down at the kitchen table, spreading out the papers they had accumulated. "Javier called me earlier. The involvement of Marcus Holloway is a game changer. This is no longer just a divorce case. We need to protect you, and fast." Kendra shook her head, overwhelmed. "I just can't believe this is happening. I thought this was about money, about him leaving me with nothing. But now I'm dealing with criminals, people who would kill to cover their tracks." Rebecca's tone was firm. "You're right. This is much bigger than you thought. We need to make sure Ryan's crimes don't implicate you. We'll be filing for protective orders, making sure you have everything you need to stay safe. But we also need to play smart. We need to make sure the legal system can't be manipulated. Ryan will fight dirty. He already has." Kendra felt a surge of anger. "I'm not backing down. I've been too quiet for too long. He's going to pay for what he's done." Sandra placed a reassuring hand on Kendra's. "And he will. But this isn't just about winning a court case. It's about making sure you're safe, and that his entire network is exposed." That night, as Kendra sat alone in her apartment, she went through the files once more, trying to find something, anything, that could give her a clear way forward. But the more she read, the more tangled the web became. Ryan had been involved in this world for far too long. And now Kendra realized he had pulled her into it, whether she had realized it or not. The question now wasn't just how to defeat him, it was how to survive him. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Lisa. "I'm worried. I saw something today. Ryan's been at the bank, accessing accounts. He's getting desperate. Watch your back." The message sent a chill down Kendra's spine. She knew Ryan wasn't done with her. In fact, he was just getting started. The following morning, Sandra met with Kendra again, this time to discuss the protective measures they would be taking. A security team would be hired, and she'd be placed under surveillance, just in case Ryan or his associates decided to make a move. Kendra's mind was still reeling from everything that had happened, but she forced herself to focus. "I'm ready to go all in," she said firmly. "Ryan thinks he can scare me into submission." "He's wrong." Sandra nodded, her eyes filled with resolve. "Let's make sure he knows that." As they left the office, Kendra felt a shift within herself. She wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. She was fighting for her life. Ryan may have thought he could control her with his lies and his manipulations, but now she was the one in control. She was the one calling the shots. And no matter what happened next, she would see this fight through to the end. The tension in Kendra's life had reached a breaking point. Every day felt like a new battlefield, whether it was meetings with Rebecca, frantic phone calls with Javier, or late-night research into Ryan's criminal network. Each discovery added a new layer to the nightmare, and yet, as the weeks dragged on, Kendra found herself no closer to an end. Instead, the stakes kept rising. The protective orders had been filed, and a security team had been assigned to keep watch over Kendra and her home. Still, the sense of unease lingered. Ryan had not made any direct moves against her yet, but it was clear from his behavior that he was preparing for something big. He was getting desperate, and desperation made people dangerous. Javier had finally tracked down a few of Marcus Holloway's associates, and what he uncovered left them all on edge. Holloway wasn't just involved in arms dealing and money laundering. He had connections with high-level criminals, some of whom operated in international black markets. Ryan, it seemed, was not only in too deep, but was also running out of time to cover his tracks. Kendra now knew that, should the truth come out, Ryan's life would be over, and he would do anything to keep that from happening. Kendra's mind raced as she reviewed the evidence in front of her. Sandra had already lined up key witnesses to testify against Ryan, and they were preparing for the courtroom showdown. But the weight of what they were about to expose hung heavy over Kendra. The fallout from this trial wasn't just going to destroy Ryan. It would dismantle everything they had built, their entire lives, every lie he'd fed her. That afternoon, as she sat with Sandra and Lisa in the office, the door swung open. Javier entered, his expression grave. He didn't waste any time. "I've got news," he said, his voice tense. "Ryan's been making moves. I've intercepted a few of his messages, and it looks like he's planning to flee the country." Kendra's stomach tightened. "Flee? Where is he going?" "Somewhere off the grid. I'm still trying to pinpoint his exact location, but he's making arrangements to disappear. He's been in touch with a few people who specialize in getting people out of the country without leaving a trace." Sandra frowned. "That's a serious escalation. If Ryan's trying to skip town, it means he knows the walls are closing in. But we can't let him get away." Kendra clenched her fists. "He's not getting away with this. Not now, not ever." Javier nodded. "We've got a window of time. If we act fast, we can block his escape and make sure he faces the consequences of what he's done. But we'll need to move quickly." Kendra's thoughts were racing. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. If Ryan was planning to run, this was her last chance to catch him and bring everything he'd done into the light. "I want to make sure everything is in place," Kendra said, her voice firm. "We need to gather every shred of evidence we can, get the court to freeze his assets, and ensure that when he's caught, there's no way out for him." The next few hours were a blur of frantic phone calls and emails. Sandra worked tirelessly to ensure that the legal system would block Ryan's attempts to flee, while Javier dug deeper into Ryan's connections, trying to track him down before it was too late. Kendra worked on her own strategy, reviewing every piece of evidence once again, ensuring that nothing was missed. It was late that evening when Kendra received an unexpected phone call. "Sam," Sandra said, her voice low and urgent. "Ryan's made his move. He's gone, he's taken off." Kendra's heart sank. "What do you mean he's gone? How could he just leave?" "We've been tracking his movements. He booked a private flight under a fake name. He's gone. He's heading out of the country tonight." Kendra's mind spun. This was the moment Ryan had been preparing for. He had been running from the law, from his lies, from the truth. And now, just as they were about to corner him, he had slipped through their fingers. "Can we stop him?" Kendra asked, her voice trembling. Sandra hesitated. "We're going to try, but I'm going to need you to be patient. We have to act quickly to prevent his escape, but we also need to make sure we don't lose the evidence. This is going to take everything we've got." Kendra gripped her phone tighter. "I'm not going to let him get away with it. He's going to answer for everything. Javier was already working to contact airport authorities, and Sandra had called in a few favors to ensure that Ryan's private flight was grounded. They had a slim window, but Kendra refused to let Ryan escape justice. The hours stretched on, each one feeling like an eternity. Every second that passed, Kendra feared she would lose him, lose the opportunity to make him face the consequences. Her heart pounded as she waited for the next update. Then, just as the sun began to rise, Kendra's phone buzzed. It was a message from Javier. "We've got him. Flight was canceled. He's been stopped." Kendra felt the weight of relief crash over her. They had done it. Ryan had been caught. He wasn't getting away. Not this time. But as she read through the message, a darker thought began to form in her mind. This wasn't over. Ryan may have been stopped for now, but the danger he had been involved with, the people he had crossed, none of it was going away. The battle was far from over, but Kendra knew one thing for sure. She would see it through to the end. Whatever it took, she would bring Ryan down, and she would make sure the truth came to light. Kendra stood in front of the courthouse, the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. The battle with Ryan had been long and brutal, filled with moments of uncertainty and fear. But now, after everything, the lies, the betrayals, the revelations about Ryan's involvement in criminal enterprises, she had finally reached the end of this chapter. It was the morning of the trial, the day she had been preparing for, the day that, she hoped, would bring everything to light. Kendra's hands shook slightly as she adjusted her coat, but her resolve was stronger than it had ever been. She wasn't walking into that courtroom as the woman Ryan had once controlled. She was walking in as a force of her own. A woman who had fought back, a woman who had refused to let him win. Rebecca, her attorney, was by her side, going over final details. "We're ready, Sam," Sandra said, her voice filled with determination. "This is it. We've got the evidence. We've got the witnesses. He doesn't stand a chance." Kendra nodded, but her mind wasn't entirely on the case. She had come to terms with the truth. No matter what happened in that courtroom, this fight had already changed her. She had gone from being a wife, a victim, to a woman taking control of her own fate. But that didn't mean it would be easy. Ryan still had power, still had influence, and the dark network he had once hidden behind could still be dangerous. Inside the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Kendra took a deep breath as she walked through the doors. She noticed Ryan immediately, sitting at the defense table, his posture stiff and his expression hard, as though he were still trying to hold on to whatever power he once had. But his eyes didn't meet hers. He couldn't. Kendra could feel the shift. He had lost. The world that he thought he controlled, that he thought he could hide behind, was crumbling around him. Ryan's attorney, a man who had once made Kendra feel small with his arrogant demeanor, was already setting up his defense. But even he looked uneasy today. The evidence Rebecca's team had gathered, along with the damning testimonies, was irrefutable. Kendra was no longer just a victim in the eyes of the law. She was a survivor who had gathered the pieces of her shattered life and was now presenting them for all to see. The trial began, and the air was thick with anticipation. The first few witnesses were called, each one exposing a piece of the web Ryan had tried so hard to hide. The offshore accounts, the shady business deals, the threats to silence those who might speak up. Each revelation was another nail in Ryan's coffin. But it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about his deception, his complete betrayal of the woman he had promised to love and protect. Kendra felt a sense of vindication with each piece of evidence that was presented, but she kept her eyes on Ryan. He remained silent, though his body language betrayed his anxiety. He was no longer the man who had once made her feel powerless. He was just a man now, a man who had run out of options. Then, it was Kendra's turn to testify. Her heart raced as she walked to the witness stand, but she was ready. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind countless times. The questions, the answers, the pain of reliving what Ryan had done to her. But she knew it had to be done. She had to stand there and face him, face everything he had put her through. Sandra stood beside her, guiding her through the questions. "Kendra, can you please describe what happened the day Ryan filed for divorce?" Kendra took a deep breath, steadying herself. "He sent me a text message," she began, her voice steady. "He told me he was leaving me. That was it. No explanation. No warning. Just a message. And then he emptied our joint account and disappeared." There was a pause in the courtroom as the gravity of her words sank in. Kendra felt a flicker of anger, but she pushed it down. She had to remain in control. "But that wasn't all. I found out later that everything he had built, Everything I thought I knew about our life was built on lies. He was involved in criminal activity. He had been using me, manipulating me for years. The defense attorney attempted to discredit her, but Sandra was prepared, expertly countering every attempt to twist the truth. As Kendra spoke, she felt the power of her words. It wasn't just the evidence that would condemn Ryan. It was the truth, the raw truth of what he had done to her and so many others. And it was in that moment, as she stood tall and faced the man who had shattered her life, that Kendra realized something important. She had won. She had already won, regardless of what happened next. The trial continued for several more hours, but the outcome was clear. Ryan's defense crumbled under the weight of the evidence, and as the final testimonies were heard, it was clear that the truth was on Kendra's side. When the verdict was read, the courtroom fell into a heavy silence. Guilty, the judge declared, his voice firm. Ryan's face turned pale as the reality of his situation finally hit him. The years of lies, the manipulation, the criminal enterprise, everything had caught up with him. There would be no escaping this. Kendra stood as the verdict was read, her heart racing, her hands shaking. She wanted to let out a triumphant cheer, to finally let go of the anger and fear that had weighed her down for so long. But instead, she simply nodded. She had won. And more importantly, she had found herself again. As Ryan was escorted out of the courtroom, Kendra locked eyes with him one final time. This time, there was no fear in her gaze. There was only strength. He had underestimated her, but now, as she walked out of the courtroom, she knew that she had taken back everything he had tried to take from her. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. The aftermath of the trial, the emotional scars, the people Ryan had hurt, those things would take time to heal. But Kendra was no longer defined by her past or by the man who had tried to destroy her. She was free, and as she walked into the future, she knew one thing. She would never let anyone make her feel small again. She had fought for her life, for her dignity, and now the world was hers to rebuild.